Hey everybody, welcome to Jets Talk Now. I'm Paul Fiore. I'm joined today by Dom C of Jets X Factor. Dom's my first guest ever on our show, and I appreciate Dom joining. I've appreciated Dom's overall perspective when it comes to kind of the Jets, the college quarterbacks specifically. He dives deep into those things, and Dom and I over the last year, sometimes we'll go back and forth on X about certain players, and if he sees something I post that he disagrees with, he'll jump in, and I might say something back. So we have some good dialogue, and I thought it'd be a great time now that the season's over. And we just endured one of the worst seasons in franchise history. It can be debated if it was the worst or not. People have recency bias, so they have a tendency to make it the worst. But the Adam Gase years were definitely bad, and I've been around long enough to remember the Rich Kotite years, and God knows those were pretty awful too. And
yep,
so
Coslet and all those those fun stuff.
The sad part about our history as Jet fans is we actually have a challenge finding the worst season, because there's so many of them. There's a lot of teams be like, oh, I remember the worst year ever was such and such. And I sit back and I go, well, I don't know. I can go back and look. And I like to, I unfortunately can remember the good seasons a lot easier than the bad ones, I guess. So Dom, thanks for coming on. I appreciate it, man.
My pleasure. And it's like I said, my pleasure. And it's an honor to be the first guest on the Fiore show here. So
thank you, sir.
Yeah. Man.
So I wanted to start with just getting, there's a lot of discourse around Aaron Glenn's first season. And, I'll just say this. When he was hired, I was not for the hire personally, because I feel like we've been down this road. And it's nothing against Glenn in per se, as much as it is the type of hire he was. Another defensive coordinator, first-time head coach, regardless of his resume, and he has a deep one, so I think people need to just back off a little bit about his resume. He's done a lot of stuff to get to where he is, and it's impressive to me that he did those things. But coming to New York, almost 15 years of no playoffs, 10 of which not even making it to 500, in a media market that is looking for blood and a fan base that's frustrated, not bringing in somebody with experiences, as we've seen, has been problematic, right? Like Robert Saleh came in with all this fanfare. We all remember how fiery he was on the sidelines as a DC. By the end of his tenure here, he looked like, somebody, stole his dog, and he didn't want to ever be anywhere but the Jets sideline. So it just has a tendency to really destroy, the everything that makes that person who he is. But it's just a daunting job. And so I was against the AG hire. But once they hired him, it's like, okay, well, let's see what he can do. And, he brought his coaches in, and, I was okay with the Wilkes hire because it made sense at the time, bringing in an experienced guy, and AG wanted to be a kind of the CEO of the team. And there are people out for blood, right? So if all you got to do is go online, I would say the fan base is, and maybe it's just louder with this group, but I feel like it's more like 65-35 or 70-30 that people wanted him fired, one and done.
Oh yeah. Yeah. If not more, if not, 3-1 or something like that. 4-1.
Yeah, it might have been higher. And I said, I was riding the wave in the beginning of the year when they were 0-7. And I'm like, look, man, if this season ends with a 2-win or 3-win year, you have to consider moving on. And then, he flipped the script by basically trading away his two best defensive players. And, for lack of a better word, and we can say whatever it is, but when you start Brady Cook the last quarter of the season, it's an intention to lose at that point. So I stopped grading the games. Personally, it was kind of a waste. Mm-hmm. So I looked at it and said, he's coming back. So why do I even bother losing my breath over whether he should or shouldn't come back? But I'm curious your perspective on Aaron Glenn, his first season. And I don't think deserving of a year two is the right word, because he certainly didn't, I don't think, prove anything. But what's your perspective on the fact that he's being brought back by Woody?
Well, I mean, it's going to sound this statement's going to sound super, super negative, Paul, but it's the only way I can kind of phrase it, is that, bad organizations continue to make bad decisions.
Right.
And we can bitch and complain about Aaron Glenn, the head coach, and as a hire, and if he should get year 2 all we want. The crux of the problem starts well above Aaron Glenn, and it's with Woody, which we're gonna have no say in the matter. You know, as Jets fans, I think the only thing to look forward to, the only rope that I'm hanging on to is when does Woody really let go of the reins of this organization? Right? We know it's going to stay in the Johnson family.
Right.
You know? But when does Brick get more involved? When does, do they bring in another partner? Or, when is Woody too old to deal with anything about, Jets related?
Right.
When does he want to spend more time out, across the pond in England? So the crux of the problem really starts with Woody, but I digress. That's not going to change. He's not going to sell the team. And so we're here with AG, and I think the problem with AG, I think you hit it on the head, because you and I are in lockstep in that. I was just ready for something different. I didn't want another first-time head coach from the defensive side of the ball. Like been there, done that. Like, just show me some wherewithal to try something different. I don't care what it was. I don't care what it was. And yes, we've tried. We've tried the offensive retreads, and Adam Gase didn't work. When Rich Kotite didn't work. We tried the fresh, young offensive coordinator mind in Bruce Costa, didn't work. We tried the even younger, fresher. Oh my God, why can't I think of his name? Who's the guy that just got fired from the Raiders? He was our coach years and years ago. You know what I mean?
Pete Carroll.
Pete Carroll. Good Lord, I just drew a blank. It didn't work. I just was, so I'm not saying that this hire would have absolutely been the turning point, and it would the organization would have turned around. But I was just ready for something different, man. I was just ready for something different, and I don't think Aaron Glenn has done himself any favors, right?
Right.
I don't think he started, his tenure properly in the sense that, hey, listen, this team's our team. We're here to win. All the stuff, all those promises that he gave the fans, and the hard ass routine that he gave the media, and like this, that, and the other thing. Like I felt it was a very, very disingenuous. So at least that's the inner feeling that I got. But all that would have been, poo-pooed away and forgotten if they had just won, and they didn't. They started out 0-1, tough game, blown out 0-2, blown out 0-3, blown out 0, now 0-4, 0-5, 0-7.
Right.
Jesus Christ, what are we doing here? Before they start trading away some assets.
Yeah.
So what do I think? We know Glenn's not going anywhere, right? I don't think he's the man for the job. I think we're going to be having this discussion sooner rather than later. So again, bad organizations continue to make bad decisions. If it was me, I might have a little foresight and try to get ahead of the curve, try to get ahead of the means and do something earlier, even if I'm a little early on it, rather than have to do something later,
So with what happened today in Black Monday, are you in the camp of, Stefanski was fired? Would he be somebody that you would replace Glenn with? Would you make a move like that? Would you, that's, I guess, people who argue for him to come back. And I think my argument with him is not that I want him. I've been very clear that if you're replacing him, who are you replacing him with? I don't want another first timer. So, would a Stefanski answer that question or I'm just curious your perspective.
So like I said, I'd be okay with something different than Aaron Glenn. So if you want another first timer, give it to me. Give me a first timer on the opposite side of the ball. Give me that young up and coming coordinator. Who I might even younger and more up and coming. I'll use like a oh my God. Give me a Josh McCown type,
right?
A guy like that who maybe I'm a year early, but man, if it hits big like that. Do what the Rams did with Sean McVay. Do what San Francisco and all these teams did with Kyle Shanahan, with Matt LaFleur. Green Bay did with Matt LaFleur. Like, go take a chance on something innovative. Like, that's what I need. Like, the old school, like ground and pound. I'm gonna take belt to ass and we're gonna play my style of defense and football and make you know our names. Like, that just doesn't work in this day and age, man. You got to be smarter.
Yeah.
You got to be smarter. You got to be smarter than the opposite team. And I think on both sides of the ball, on the offensive side of the ball, I think it had to do with a lack of skill, skill positions and so on and so forth. And on the defensive side of the ball, I think it was a lack of scheme or a lack of, we all thought Steve Wilks, or at least I'll speak for myself, I thought Steve Wilks was something that he really wasn't. There was no creativity. There's no creativity on either side of the ball. Everything was, from our TV screens, through our TV screens on our couches, you and I could tell, all right, well, guess what? Here comes Quincy Williams on a blitz. They're going to run, two deep man coverage across the side. Here comes 3rd and 2. They're in a shotgun. Watch inside zone handoff. Like, everything was so predictable.
What was weird about Wilks for me, and it was evident really early, it's like he was running a defense that did not fit the personnel in any way. When you've got 2 undersized linebackers, right? His defensive schemes, those guys look lost out there. I've never watched a defense so easily fooled consistently. And the lack of pressure I can't think of, aside from Briggs having a good year and, Phillips, I like him, but like, you didn't get any better anywhere on the field. And it was it was clear that Wilks, it was almost like he was stuck in a generational gap on defense. To your point, X's and O's in general for the Jets this year, they were out schemed. They were out game planned. Everything every single week. I couldn't think of a week where we had a competitive advantage in the coaching chair in any way for either side of the ball.
Yeah, no. Maybe we had the better coaching in the special teams portion.
Yeah.
But offense and defense, I don't know if we were, we had, maybe Cleveland, maybe. No, I wouldn't even say that. I think.
You're facing Dylan Gabriel, and our special teams basically won us that game too, right? So.
Yeah,
it was bad, right, Tom? So now that so we're aligned in that I'm of the mindset like Glenn is over his head. I'm a Jet fan, so I'm going to support the guy and hope that I'm wrong, right? At the end of the day, the best thing can happen for anybody, no matter how entrenched you are as a fan in your belief about his inability to do the job. The best thing that can happen is we're on here next January saying, man, you know what? The dude proved us wrong a little bit. And so I guess one of the things I was talking about, more recently was, okay, he's going to be here. We've got 4 months now between now and the draft. We had Black Monday happen. I don't believe the Jets announced anything with regard to their coaches today. And I'm not saying they would or wouldn't have. And I think AG is talking tomorrow to the media.
They both are. Muj and AG are talking.
Okay.
Talking to the media.
And by the way, I would say my first year on Muj, and it's funny because the defense of Aaron Glenn is, if you thought Muji did a pretty good job, then you need to give Glenn some of that credit. And I'm not saying you shouldn't, but my thing with Muji that I was impressed by was, I wasn't overly impressed with, first of all, his free agency I thought was not good at all. But it's the first year as a GM. You don't have your people in place. That's hard.
Yeah. I will say this. I don't mean to cut you off, but people need to know that draft was pretty much all the intel and stuff, was done for years right. That didn't involve the guys that, his inner circle. So
just like Joe Douglas's first year, right?
Correct.
I mean,
most everyone's first year.
Yeah. So, I looked at him like he got, listen, we like some of the picks, the deeper picks in day 3 were pretty awful. That's fine. The free agency, I didn't love it. I didn't like, Cisco, Stevens. He was okay. Like everyone was getting crazy 5 or 6 weeks into the season saying the Jets fixed him. And he regressed as the year went on. I thought, and at the end of the day, you didn't get any interceptions in your secondary. So let's just calm down about how happy we are about Brandon Stevens as a free agent signing. But to his credit, I thought he made some nice in-season pickups and moves and got rid of, low draft capital to get serviceable players that had impact. And it's hard to say that on a 3-14 team. But I'm semi-optimistic about Muji's ability coming from the Broncos organization to maybe help build this roster. But going back to Glenn, knowing he's here now, what are the things that I don't think he's going to ever, like, he's not going to walk into year 2 and all of a sudden it's a 75-25 supporting Aaron Glenn split. But how does he start to get some semblance of people like you and me who are skeptical, to say the least, feeling, all right, maybe there's some progress happening here in the offseason, like, for example, with this coaching staff?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the answer is very simple for me. Is win games. Like it or not, we can be skeptical. I can be skeptical. I can say that he was never my choice. I can tell you, with sincerity right now that I don't think he's going to be able to figure it out or turn it around.
Right.
But I beg to be wrong on that. You know what I mean? I beg to be wrong because like you, like me, like everyone else in Jets Twitter, or at least you hope everyone else in Jets Twitter, or in, Jets content world is, we're Jets fans first. Like we want to, if Aaron Glenn proves me completely wrong and turns into the guy, I will gladly eat that humble pie day in and day out. So you want to win back some of the fan base. Listen, Paul, probably as well as I do, most of these people and most of the noise that you hear isn't original. You hear a lot of people barking other people's, other people's gripes. But I think you'll shut a lot of them up if you start winning games. Yeah, it's a fan base that's just ready, and it's a fan base that's just ready to win games, and there's a portion of it that doesn't really care what happens. Right. They're so compartmentalized. I think they'd rather be right than happy.
Yeah, I think there's a definite group of people that no matter what this man does, it doesn't matter. They're going to want him out. So
correct.
So let's just so I don't disagree. He needs to win games, but like if we're thinking about the offseason right now, right? DC. Do you have anyone in mind that you look at and you go, man, that would be a good, like if he made that hire, I'd be like, wow, you know what? Because here's my argument. I look at it and I go, man, if I see him hire a buddy as his DC, right, a friend of Glenn, somebody from the Detroit staff, and they had a terrible defense this year, I'll be very disappointed. It won't feel like there's any improvement happening. Again, and I agree, wins and losses ultimately is what it comes down to. But if he starts making moves on his staff, let's talk about the defensive side of the ball first. Who do you like?
Oh man, I mean, I think like tier 1 of 1 is Jim Schwartz. If you can get a guy like Jim Schwartz in here, a proven commodity, a guy who's had his his slice of the pie, if you will, as a head coach, and one of those who has just figured out that the world has figured out is just a better coordinator. What I think Robert Saleh they're going to find out about Robert Saleh, so on and so forth. But Jim Schwartz is the guy that comes in. He, his scheme is is now not so unique, but he came in and he kind of reinvigorated the wide nine and the form, creating chaos with 4-man so you can keep 7 back. Like a lot of the principles that come out of some of the cover 4, stalwarts that are in the NFL right now, like Dan Quinn and Robert Saleh and all those guys. Like a lot of that is derivative of what Schwartz was doing for years and years and years. So he is, for me, one of one in terms of GM or DC hires. I know a lot of people like Al Harris as well. And he had some success with McCarthy down in Dallas, and now he's the whatever he is in Chicago. He might just be hanging on and be McCarthy's DC again when he if he gets a third bite of the apple.
Right.
So I'd be interested in him because I think that there's tangible evidence that he can help turn the defense around. The last one, which I think is kind of questionable, also, because I'm not sure he's ready to go back to a DC, would be Raheem Morris.
Okay.
There's a relationship there with him and
there is, yep,
with him and Glenn. I think that he's a good teacher. I think he's a good developer of talent, and I think his scheme can be successful. It's not what Aaron Glenn ran in Detroit. So we would have, and it's definitely, again, he comes from the lineage of, Dan Quinn. So he, it's going to be a lot of what we saw at Robert Saleh, but, I know the coaches are different, but if you have guys like Jermaine Johnson and Sherwood and just say, hypothetically, you bring Quincy back and, so on and so forth. And Will McDonald. You have these guys who are successful in that scheme, so
right?
Why not entertain bringing that scheme back with a new voice to coach up or correct or tweak? You know what I mean?
It'll be interesting to see what Glenn does in the defensive side of the ball because he was so hands off.
Yeah,
and I came to the conclusion about halfway through the season, getting involved when your defense is that bad at that point only hurt him. At that, if he would have taken over the play calling. Like a lot of people are like, why doesn't he take over the play calling? Well, if he takes over the play calling, and look what happened. And again, they were terrible, but you fired Wilkes. His replacement's worse. Imagine he takes over play calling from Wilkes. Things don't get better. It's just a further indictment on Glenn. So to me, it's an easy, and I hate to use the word scapegoat, but Wilkes was an easy kind of scapegoat in this entire scenario. Now he goes into year 2. He doesn't have that ability to do this. He's going to have to figure it out. Does he want to run his scheme? Does he want to do something like he did last year where he's hands off the defense, but he gives it to someone, like you said, a Raheem Morris? Does he give it to a Wink Martindale? I know that name's been brought up a few times.
Yeah, I don't know about Wink.
I don't know if him and Wink will just maybe brawl in the locker room. It's just there's a lot there. But who's he bringing in that can actually do something? And is he going to be heavily involved, or is he going to continue to be the CEO coach? What about on the offensive side of the ball? Do you expect or want changes on the coaching staff?
Both.
Okay.
Give me. Well, I shouldn't say that. All right, let me rephrase. I think there needs to be an influx of talent on the offensive side of the ball, right? We had a very successful running game. Our offensive line stayed intact for all 17 games, right?
Yep.
Same starters, which is an anomaly. It can't, it usually doesn't happen. We can't bank on that happening again.
We know that as Jet fans, that's for sure.
Yeah. So I think that there needs to be an influx of talent, but you take that away, like they were very good, right?
Yeah.
I thought, and I've been standing on 10 toes for a couple years now, saying that Joe Tippmann's a guard; he's not a center.
Right.
And he played like an excellent guard this year. So
yeah,
Membu was an absolute home run. Moving Joe Tippmann from center to guard was an absolute home run. I think you saw natural, gradual improvement that was going to come with another year of maturity, another year of physical maturity, getting bigger and stronger in Olu. He's still not what we think he can get to.
That's right.
But the arrow's pointing up, and you saw some regression in Simpson, and I think that. I don't think Simpson's a bad player. I just think that Simpson's now his three most or worst years when you talk about terms of PFF grade, when you talk about terms of penalties, when you talk about terms of negative effect on the offense, happens with 2 years of Lamar Jackson and 1 year of Justin Fields. He just doesn't he just doesn't do well with the mobile quarterbacks, right?
Right.
But you have a statue like Aaron Rodgers back there, and he's not getting all these holding penalties. He's not doing all that stuff.
Right.
So he does his job well. I think he had a down year, and Josh Myers was a fill-in. And whatever. I thought he was fine. Although the numbers, the metrics say differently. I thought. I don't remember any single game that Josh Myers at center lost specifically for.
Yeah, if I look correctly, he was ranked in the bottom 5 starting centers. But I don't.
But again, the sum of all the parts was good.
You're not going to have 5 outrageous players on the offensive line. If you have 3 strong players like they have, and I think to your point, those 3 foundational pieces, you can get away with a middle of the road center guard here or there. Like that's not the end. The Jets' problem this year with the furthest thing that problem was their offensive line. So I agree. Now, are you in the camp? This is what I'm interested in because you're the guy I go to when it comes to the quarterback stuff because I have my own personal views but I'm a novice when it comes to grading these guys out and understanding them. But how important is a QB coach for a rookie quarterback development wise?
I think it's important. I absolutely think it's important. I think the offensive coordinator and the scheme being a fit for the quarterback skill set is more important.
Right.
But I absolutely think it's important. And you talked about what changes I think AG needs to make on that. I think he needs to bring in somebody who either as a consultant or as an assistant or as the absolute quarterback guru.
Right.
That can be the one-on-one true go-to for a young quarterback. For however good or history or good of a coach the current QB coach is. What's his name? Charles. What is it?
Charles London, the running backs coach.
Yeah. Well, listen, he had some success, and he was responsible. He was the quarterback's coach when Geno had his best season ever.
Yeah.
But he's also had 2, licks of the lollipop with young quarterbacks, one in Malik Willis and one in Desmond Ridder, and neither of them developed. So I have no confidence that he's going to turn it around. Yeah. And I also have no confidence that Aaron Glenn is going to, he's taken the CEO position really, really well. He doesn't want to get too involved in the offense. It's Tanner's offense. He doesn't want to get too involved in the defense. It was Steve Wilkes' defense, So you better bring in a quarterback coach that can help groom and develop a young guy. That's what
I think it's an interesting thing, right? Like you look at a guy like Aaron Glenn, right? And because we don't think he gives you a competitive advantage on the X's and O's, he doesn't get involved on the defensive side of the ball. Can he mask his deficiencies by just bringing in really, really strong, defensive coordinator, quarterback coach, and then Muji fills up the roster with talent, and all of a sudden, is Glenn, is he the coach that that he can play the CEO role because he's got all the guys around him that know what the hell they're doing? I guess that's what you got to hope for.
Yeah, and you know what? That you're right. That's what you hope for. But you know what happens in structures like that? They either start getting picked off, and you start having to replace them, or I shouldn't say or. I mean, the best case scenario is you look back at the old Green Bay or the old Kansas City staffs, right?
Mm-hmm.
How many head coaches came from the old Green Bay staff? When they in the Favre years when Green Bay was at its pinnacle, right? Holmgren years, they had 4 or 5 or 6 guys that came off of that staff that became head coaches, right? Chiefs had the Chiefs and Andy Reid started to do the same thing. So,
they create a pipeline. A pipeline. Yeah.
So either the teams are going to you're going to lose those guys. and the deficiencies of the head coach is going to be kind of, brought back to light, and you're going to have to make a decision on a head coach, or you become so good and you become some sort of, year in, year out, consistent threat that no one cares. Everyone stays along and rides to the party. I doubt that's going to happen for us.
Right.
I doubt that's going to happen for us. We haven't made the playoffs in 14 years.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I agree. So what I've been thinking in my head. So we talked about the staff. I agree. I think if Charles London's still in the role, that makes me really nervous. Who they hire for the defensive coordinator is going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Listen, I don't know if anybody on the offensive staff should be safe. I think Tanner's safe. He had the worst quarterback situation in football. I'm confident he didn't have input in what they brought in. Yeah. I remember reading a report early on. Fields was the guy that Glenn wanted.
Yes.
And then the funny thing is I almost feel like talk about a mispairing, because you look at what Tanner was trying to run and what Fields was good at, and it just was never a match in my mind. And so now what I'm hoping is these guys get into a room and go, okay, Tanner, let's talk about your offensive principles and the ideal type of quarterback to run that offense, right? Because the only way this is going to work is yes, you can, like people say, well, go acquire the quarterback and build the system around the quarterback. The reality of it is, for the Jets, I don't think, no matter how much people want to pound the table, Joe Burrow is not going to become a New York Jet. Lamar Jackson's not going to become a New York Jet. Either of their own volition, they will choose not to be traded, or just the reality of the Jets are not in a place right now where they should be getting rid of 3 or 4 first-round draft picks to go and get $50, $60, $70 million a year quarterbacks. I just think that's, it doesn't make sense to me. Mm-hmm. So free agency is obviously before the draft. And I think that what the Jets do in free agency will give you a little bit of an inclination of what they're thinking in the draft, personally. And so what do you think? Like, when you look at when you look at the free agent market and you look at guys that will shake free or maybe be available for trade, let's talk about, let's not talk about the high end guys, but the Mac Joneses of the world, the Tanner McKees of the world, and the free agents. You've got Mariota, Jimmy G. The most popular name right now in Jets land is yet another Green Bay quarterback, and Malik Willis. What do you think? What would make you feel decent about the moves in free agency at the quarterback level?
That you bring in guys who will compete. So you talked about, Malik Willis and Tanner McKee. Well, I'll tell you this much. I love Malik Willis. I love what Matt LaFleur has done with him in Green Bay. I can assure you, he is not coming back to Charles London.
Right?
Who was his quarterback coach the first time? So if he's a quarterback's coach, just don't even bring him up. But we can talk. Like, you want to bring in a Malik Willis, and you want to draft a Dante Moore if he comes out, and have them compete. Or you want to, maybe it's not Dante Moore. You want to bring in you trade for a Tanner McKee, and you want to draft a Garrett Nussmeier in round 3 or 4. And you want to have them compete for a job, that's fine. The idea of having a bridge quarterback makes sense. Yes. It makes sense. Like Dante Moore is raw, needs some time. I don't think he's going to be successful right away if thrown into the fire.
Right.
I also don't think that the Jets, as constituted right now, have much real support for him to do that. Right. So everyone's like, well, bring in a bridge quarterback that can hold the fort down for 6-7 games until he can get his feet wet, and then you turn it over to him. I think that's wrong. I think you bring him in. If you draft Dante Moore and you trade for Tanner McKee, and Tanner McKee wins the job, it's Tanner McKee's job.
Yeah, almost like a Mahomes redshirt season his first year.
Correct. And then and then year 2. It's not like you don't do what Minnesota did and just turn it over to JJ McCarthy. Now they had to, because Sam was going to get paid, so that was financial. But like in a situation like that, like what's the worst thing that's going to happen? You find out that a Tanner McKee is real, and you have more than one good quarterback on your roster? I mean, is that a bad thing?
Do you think any of these guys, like when you look at what Engstrand's trying to do offensively, who would be that fit in the free agent / trade market for the veterans?
Listen, he's of West Coast principles, man. So there's a lot, a lot of it is timing based. I don't buy the fact that it's got to be, like we'd heard about all this RPO stuff he was going to run with Fields. We barely saw any of it.
I was going to say, yeah, where?
Yeah, we barely saw any of it. Now, it might have been, once he went down with that knee injury, they just moved on, or they realized that his processing was just too slow for that to be very effective.
Do you remember early in the season, every time he did he would do RPOs and even if the play went well, they'd say, well, this was a poor read on his part. He actually made the wrong decision. I think what happened was he got concussed, and then either he became super gun shy, or they realized, like you're saying, this guy's not reading the field and it's too complex for him to be doing these things. We're dumbing it down. And I mean, he was an unplayable quarterback. It was ridiculous how bad he was.
Yeah, it was awful. So, I think anybody that can, play in timing, that can, doesn't need to necessarily push the ball vertically, press the ball vertically, play more on that horizontal plane, with those crossing the mesh concepts and the corner routes and the daggers and so on and so forth. I think any of these quarterbacks that fall into that mode, and then you add like the mobile and all these guys that we talked about fit that mold. Even the Mac Jones of the world, although he's not a guy I would probably target. Like I said, if I'm going through, there's three names that I like. I like Tanner McKee. I like Malik Willis, and those have been two names that have been constant with me all fall, not just of recent times. And the other one I like, and I don't think you'll pry him from Chicago, is Tyson Badgett. They just paid him to be. They paid him good to be the backup. But I think he's got, I think he's got low end. I think he's got some untapped upside that I'd be really, really interested in getting my hands on.
Interesting. Yeah. I'll be curious even if Charles London isn't here, right? Mm-hmm. Malik Willis is out in the market. It's just a matter of paying him, right? But he's got to also want to be here. Does he look at the Jets as a destination he'd want to go to after what just happened with Fields? He's going to finally get a real opportunity to be the starter. He went through what he went through in Tennessee. Does he go, there's going to be options for me because he's going to be wanted in the market. There's not a big class of quarterbacks coming out in college. If Moore does or doesn't declare, it's still limited on the first round talent. So you're going to wind up going deeper into the draft to get guys that are more development quarterbacks. So a Malik Willis will be very attractive as a free agent. So is an Arizona more attractive than the Jets to someone like him? Is Miami potentially, if they decide to go after a quarterback? There's a few teams that really need a quarterback. And you look at the Jets and you go, yeah, they need a quarterback. They've got money. Do they just have to pay and then, way more than anybody else to get this guy to say yes? And will he be a fit? That's my biggest fear for Malik Willis.
Yeah, listen, I think Malik Willis is a long shot until you make drastic changes on the offensive staff. It's a moot point because he's not going to come here with Charles London. So,
right.
I think probably Tanner McKee are trying to pry a guy like Tyson Badgett out of the realm would be the way I would go. I know that people like Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray would step in and probably be the best quarterback that we've had in many years, but there's a lot that comes with that. I'm not saying no, I wouldn't do it. It just wouldn't be my first option because he's owed a lot of money. Man,
you and I couldn't be further apart on this one. I can't live through a Kyler Murray season personally. Here's my feel.
Okay.
He's injury prone. 1, 2, his personality in New York. We just watched Justin Fields get eaten alive with the New York press. Mm-hmm. I think Kyler Murray in New York, not a good fit personality-wise. And then more important than anything else, I don't listen, when you're a smaller quarterback like him, there's very few that have any type of durability and longevity in the league and then you add into it the questions around his work ethic. Is he the kind of guy you want to bring into that locker room and hand the keys to? I'm just.
Well, he's the guy I think that would be your bridge, and that's what I'm saying. This now you're talking like a 2 or 3 year bridge that's costing you $35 million. Is that a real bridge? I don't think he's something I want to hitch my franchise to forever. But if all the other options come up, craps, Dante Moore, Paul, there's a good chance Dante Moore doesn't come out.
Yeah, no, I know you and I had a bit back and forth on this.
Yeah,
and
people don't want to understand that's still a cold hard fact. He might not come out.
So Don, let me ask this about Dante Moore, and then we'll go to the quarterbacks in general, the college kids, and I want to hear your perspective on, because we're up at, I don't want to, I know you're going to have to run here in a bit, but Todd McShay put out his mock today, and obviously he's a Joe Douglas buddy, and so he trashed the Jets and basically was like, if Dante Moore is going to become a New York Jet, he should stay in college. I do think, fair or unfair, and it's probably more fair than not, and I heard Connor Rogers talk about this on the Badlands podcast. There are agents out there who do not want their players to have anything to do with the New York Jets organization right now.
Yeah.
Do you think that at any way that plays into the decision-making process for Dante Moore? Or is it as simple as he wants to win a national title, he can get paid a bunch of money. If he doesn't win a title this year, he gets to go back and he'll take his chances in the draft, regardless of who's the team that would draft him? Or his agent's like, hey, man, you're going to be the first or second draft pick. You need to declare. Like, is it that, or do they actually think about the organization that might draft him?
I don't know, man. Yeah. I don't know. I think that right now you can look at a lot of it stems around the organization and Woody, I'm sure. Like, listen, I love Todd McShay. I'm a big fan of the work he puts out. I will take everything from last year going forward with a grain of salt what he says about the Jets. Like,
right,
he is, Joe Douglas is one of his best friends in the world, and
he's dug in.
He couldn't talk better and more flowers about Woody Johnson and the Jets prior to Joe Douglas getting fired. So I take it with a grain of salt. But I'm sure that there's some legitimacy to that. That's why we always hear that you have to pay the Jets tax, right?
The Jets tax, yeah.
And there's somebody else that I know who's very much involved or has communications in with the agents or whatnot. And he verified the same thing. He's like, guys, no one wants to come here to work with Woody, or no one wants to come here and be the next sacrificial lamb, this, that, and the other thing. He's like, people will come here. Players usually come here most of the part for financial reasons, or and coaches come here because they see it as a stepping stone.
Yeah, it's a shame. I mean, who knows when this is, to your point, it stinks from the top, and it's very hard to get past that when you've got the issue that is Woody Johnson running this thing. So, and I don't know if he's ever going to learn a lesson, as much as it is, to your point, we need to age him out of the position at some level. So let's talk about these kids. Here's what I believe today. And I've again, I'm not you, but I've watched a lot of these guys, not just these two. I've watched Ty Simpson. I watched Mateer a lot this year. I watched a lot of these different guys. Basically I look at people that are smarter than me, like you, and they go and they rank. The season begins, they go, here's the guys that we should be paying attention to. And then there's always guys during the year that just kind of, not that they come out of nowhere, but they step up their game. Like people oh, Mendoza came out of nowhere. There were people that had Mendoza as a guy to watch going into this season. It was not like,
there was plenty of guys I know in the draft community that had Mendoza as their number one quarterback.
Yeah,
coming out, going into and coming out of the summer.
Yeah, and it was just it's a disingenuous argument. They're like, well, red flag, this guy nobody was talking about. Now he's the Heisman winner and he's supposedly the consensus number one. And well, you guys aren't paying attention, because I've saw plenty of season rankings that had him in there. So my perspective right now is it's clear to me that I have Mendoza as the clear one. And I would put Moore at a tier below, and I'm very worried about his lack of experience and the need to develop him. Do you agree with that in just on the surface?
Well, I agree that Mendoza's on a tier of his own.
Okay.
As the top. He has been my number one quarterback in this class. Regardless of the guys that have chosen not to declare,
right,
the Arch Mannings of the world and so on and so forth. And Mendoza was the number one quarterback in the class for me. Darian Mensah was who's going back to Duke. He was my quarterback too. He graded out as my quarterback too. Dante Moore was 3. Ty Simpson was 4, and Brandon Sorsby, the Cincinnati quarterback who entered the portal and is now with Texas Tech, he was my number 5 quarterback.
Yeah, he got paid.
He sure did.
Yeah. So okay. So knowing that's your order, the Jets have the second pick in the draft, and so it's so early, and you've got people, and it drives me crazy, but you've got reporters and various different people, and it was funny. I said mock drafts don't mean anything. You're like, no, mock drafts are good, but my issue right now is the Raiders don't have a staff.
Yep.
So who's going to be the head coach? Who's going to be the offensive coordinator? What do they value in the position for the long term? Because I don't think Dante Moore and Fernando Mendoza are similar players.
Correct.
And so, if they bring in, like I was reading something today that said, there's a possibility Tom Brady would want to see a Brian Flores paired with a Brian Daboll.
Mm-hmm.
That feels to me more of a Dante Moore fit than a Mendoza fit for Brian Daboll. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, listen, he's got much. Daboll's very versatile, right? Okay. His offense in Buffalo was vertical based. He pushed the ball with Josh Allen. He challenged Josh Allen. Mm-hmm. He wanted Josh Allen to be aggressive vertically down the field. He wanted to do that with Daniel Jones too. Again, remember, Daniel Jones had a beautiful deep ball, but Daniel Jones couldn't stay healthy, right? So the offense kind of got kind of tweaked and geared towards, the deficiencies that he was dealing with physically. Once he got that neck injury, he really couldn't press the ball that hard. So yes, to your point, I think if you're talking about a true traditional Brian Daboll offense, you'd want somebody who can press the ball a little bit more vertically. And between the two, that is definitely Dante Moore. I think Dante Moore has the best arm talent in the class. Mm-hmm. I don't think he's the best arm. I think he's got the best arm talent. The ball just comes out freely. He throws a catchable ball. He can layer it over that second. He can layer it over that second level linebackers and find guys. His deep ball accuracy, is right up there.
Yeah,
with Ty Simpson, both better than Mendoza's. I think he's got a strong arm. I don't think he's got an elite arm strength, but I think he's got a strong arm. I think his mechanics are fundamental. So Dante Moore and his arm is not the problem.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I guess the point is we can all speculate, but nobody knows.
To that point, if they bring in somebody who has more of a West Coast principles, or if Tom Brady has influence, I think they're gonna lean towards more Mendoza, where everything's playing on the horizontal, or you want guys that to be quicker, better processors, understand the situation. In essence, what was Tom Brady? Tom Brady might have been the greatest quarterback that we've ever seen, or one of. He was in essence, he learned he got to that point from a lot of hard work. He was a game manager.
Yeah.
He was the quintessential game manager.
Yeah, he was. I agree with that. I agree 100%. In fact, until he went to Tampa, he didn't really press the ball at all.
Correct.
So, okay. So real quick, and then we'll let you go. So if the Jets are at 2, let's play this out.
Go ahead.
If Moore goes number 1, are you running the card up for Mendoza?
if both of those quarterbacks are in the draft, which I can't say with sufficient, with any sort of sufficient like feelings that will be the case. But if any of those two quarterbacks are in the if both of those quarterbacks are in the draft, I'll take whichever one falls to me.
Okay, so because one of the arguments that answers the question. So then let me ask this really quick. Knowing the seat being what it will be next year for AG, which I believe will be more than warm.
Yep.
Do you worry that they go run the card up for a Dante Moore, rush his development to get him on the field to try to save jobs?
Maybe, but again, it stems back, Paul, to the old quintessential thing that I said a couple times now on your show is bad organizations make bad decisions. I'll say this, I don't think that you I don't overthink it. You don't bypass a talent like Dante Moore because, fans want to overthink it and bypass a kid like Dante Moore because we haven't had success developing quarterbacks. And listen, Aaron Glenn very well may not develop Dante Moore if he's on the team. However, I think Dante Moore at 20 years old with that arm talent, with that tremendous upside, if he just develops a little bit, will be enticing for the next guy. Will be as enticing for the next coach to come in to kind of hone in. Just like Jackson Dart is, enticing is going to be enticing to some, just like Cam Ward is enticing to whoever is going to interview over there.
Yeah.
I think Dante Moore is I think he's a better talent than Jackson Dart.
Okay.
I wholeheartedly do. He didn't grade out as high as Cam Ward for me, but I mean, he was right there. He's in the same wheelhouse. He'd be in the same tier as Cam Ward.
So you don't agree with some of the people saying Mendoza or Moore, if they were in the last year's class, would not be at the same level as the Cam Wards of the world?
Nope, I do not.
Yeah, that's the thing. Everyone's like, it's such a weak class. Maybe the depth of the class isn't strong in the first round, but I think those two kids. First of all, my issue, I don't know. I like Dante Moore. I'm worried about Dante Moore with the Jets. But to your point, if Glenn fails anyway, and you got a talent like him that you can, maybe it becomes the next, like what happened in Chicago with Caleb Williams, right? He had a bad year. They brought in Ben Johnson, and now it's a different situation.
Yeah, sure.
Right? Trevor Lawrence is having the best year of his career. Like you see it all over. And I think that'll happen for Tennessee. So maybe to your point, the Jets go draft Dante Moore. It fails with Glenn, but now we have an attractive job. You have 3 first-round picks in 2027. You've got your quarterback. You've got all this cap space. Maybe something is different. So that's an interesting view of it. I was sitting there going, I'm just scared of it being the right fit for the Jets, but like maybe I'm overthinking it.
Yeah.
Mendoza, for me, the reason why, not only like for me, Mendoza's number one is people make fun of him. They knock him for his personality. I actually think that that's a real plus.
Yeah,
I think his personality is one that he is fearless and dares to try to become great. And when you maybe don't have all the physical talent that others, like a Tom Brady is a great example, but that work ethic, that mindset that he has, I feel like that's something that guy would be able to, he'd be able to overcome a lot of what New York brings to the day-to-day.
Mm-hmm.
I think he'd be a home run for the Jets.
Yeah, me too.
Okay. All right, cool. Well, Dom, listen, man, this was great. I really appreciate it. I know we went a little long, but
no, it's okay. It's all good, dude. It's all good.
It was awesome. I do appreciate it. It'll be interesting to see what they do, and I'd love to chat again as things happen. So, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me on, and good luck, man. Keep pumping out the content. It's a lot of fun, dude.
Thanks, man. All right, talk to you.